Good day, guys. Hopefully, you are good and doing fine, especially in your preparation for the final term exam. I wish you all good luck, of course. This pre recorded video will discuss the two remaining topics that we don't yet discuss on our face to face. It's the lesson 5 and the lesson 6. The lesson 5 will discuss about taxation, the concept of taxation, of course, its meaning and its philosophical or ethical standpoint, whether the concept of taxation is moral right or wrong. We will know that on this discussion. Okay. So of course, this is on your module. You may always check it in your module, and of course, it's part of the examination. So kindly study hard, by the way, guys, and wish you all good luck and the best for the exam. So we have here the meaning of taxation. So of course, there are three powers of the government. The power of eminent domain. It means the government has the, by the way, can you follow my mouse? The government has the power to secure private property, turning it into a public, for the public usage. So it's one of the power. Of course, the police power. And the third is our main issue or main topic, which is the power of taxation. According to De Leon, it is the inherent power of the state to demand forced contributions, take note of the term forced contributions, for public purpose or purposes. Okay, we call that taxation. Moreover, the process or means by which the sovereign or the state, through its lawmaking body, raises income to defray necessary expenses of the government. So, in short, in this line, it means that the government expenses are coming from our taxes, its projects, its maintenance. Okay? It's coming from our taxes. It's coming from the taxes. It is merely a way of appropriating the cost of the government among those who, in some measure, are privileged to enjoy its benefits and therefore must bear its burdens. Of course, the concept also of taxation is it's the sharing of burdens. Sharing of burdens. It means that um, we help each other. We help each other for the common good. And the burden there refers to our contribution, even to the point that we don't receive direct or indirect help through our tax, through our paying of taxes. Of course, that's I call it the burden of sharing. Of course, the burden of sharing. Of course, etymologically meaning taxare, from the Latin word, means to censure, to charge, or to compute. So, what are taxes for? Okay, so, these are some of the purposes of collecting taxes. Mainly, it's to provide the government funds or property which will enable it to ensure the general welfare and protection of its citizens. So, in short, it's for the general welfare, for the common good of the citizens, and of course, to protect the citizens, keeping safety. Another, it's for social economic goals such as providing funds for infrastructures that will serve the general public. So projects for roads, hospitals, buildings, okay? Especially if there are calamities that we've experienced, those operations are coming from our taxes. Of course, police power for keeping up the security and safety of the welfare of the public are also coming from our taxes. Another, it also utilized to provide quality services in terms of health care and ensuring that quality of education is provided, especially in public schools, colleges, and universities, which are managed by the state. So like the NSC is run by the government, and other government hospitals run by, of course, the government. All of these costs and expenses are coming from our tax. Okay, are coming from our tax. Of course, lastly, it's also used in aid programs for the poor, disaster response, modernization of the military, and the other legitimate government expenditures or expenses. Okay. So in short, all of the expenses of our government, all its programs, small or big, for the protection of the general public, for keeping us safety, for its modernization program, for the future of the next generation of our society. All of these expenses and costs are from our taxes. That is why um, we need to pay our taxes somehow, if that is the cause. Uh, so let's evaluate it from the ethical perspective, whether or not paying taxes are morally good or bad. For utilitarian perspective, for utilitarianism or utilitarian ethics, if if you can still remember in our discussion that utilitarian ethics is main concern in determining morality is the consequence or the result. Now, if you believe that collecting taxes, the consequence would result to happiness or pleasure of the citizens or the constituents, and many will benefit from it. For utilitarian ethics, that is morally good, of course. Okay? Why? The consequence results to happiness, and many benefit from it. But if you believe that collecting taxes produces pain, suffering of the general public, general welfare of the population, it's morally bad, of course. But if you look at it, realistically speaking, it's more good. It produces more good than bad, or pain, or suffering. That is why, for utilitarianism, it is morally acceptable and justifiable to collect taxes for the purpose of, take note, for the purpose of the happiness or pleasure for the majority, or of course, to all people, to the constituents. Okay? It's morally good. Now, for Kantian ethics with regards to duty ethics, whether it's moral, it's our moral duty to pay taxes. Now, if you can still remember the principle of humanity, the second principle for categorical imperative, it states that we should treat person or human being with dignity, respect, and value. Now, if you look at on that perspective, helping each other in terms of in dire needs, for instance, especially for the general public, helping other people through taxes. For example, giving scholarship programs, giving good quality hospitals, as I say, especially for the poor, for those who cannot afford, especially treating them as person. We don't let them die. We don't use them as an instrument for our benefit, for instance, let us say. But we also share the burden, that kind of burden of paying our taxes for the general welfare of other people, for duty ethics or Kantian ethics or deontological ethics. That is morally good. That is morally good. Okay? As such, kindly follow my mouse. No? As such, every human person has a moral obligation to look after one another, especially the less fortunate. That is the standpoint of deontological ethics. especially in line with the principle of humanity. Okay? Mm. That is why, in this sense, paying taxes faithfully will help out in fulfilling our duty or the, yes, to help our fellow human being. But we also care for them, that we value them. Okay? So for dental legal ethics, in short, paying taxes, collecting taxes for the general welfare in helping people for the benefit of the people, for their good, for our good, it's morally correct or right, justifiable. Of course, in virtue ethics, to promote justice, of course, charity and independence, collecting taxes are also justifiable. That is for virtue ethics. So, in short, based on these ethical principles from utilitarianism, deontological ethics, and from virtue ethics, collecting taxes are therefore morally good or justifiable. For natural law ethics, if you can still remember the basic seven basic goods, although it doesn't discussed here in our module, natural law ethics. But if we also ask natural law ethics, can you still remember the seven basic goods? Katong that uh, promoting peace, creating the welfare of the society. Mm. It's also in line with that principle. Why? Why we need to pay our taxes? Why is it that we need to help those less fortunate? Why do our taxes go to them? Just imagine, just imagine, without the help of our society, of our government, to allocate budget for the less fortunate people, let us say for schooling, for hospitalization, kung walay muhatag o wala tay ihatag, walay ihatag atong government as a remedy for that, do you think that you will be safe? To tell you honestly, it's no. Why? Crimes, criminal activities is expected. Stealing. Why? Because people are tend to survive and find ways to survive. If they found out, or if you found out that no one helped us in our problem, let's say financially, because there is no free school, there is no free hospital, government hospitals that will subsidize my cost of my hospitalization, or there is no public school that will subsidize my schooling, what will happen for those who are less fortunate in the society? No, they will go to criminalization. So that is why part of maintaining that kind of society that is well balanced and minimizing crimes, immoralities. That's why if you will ask natural law ethics for the common good of the society, for the peace and harmony of our society, collecting taxes are justifiable if that is the cause. If that is the cause. So that is why, as a citizen also of the Philippines, we need to be faithfully pay for our taxes, even to the point that we don't get some, let us say, benefit from any programs from the government because it focuses on the less fortunate. Although that is the case, but kindly think of a further consequence, serious consequence, if there's none, or if there's no one that will help this less fortunate in our society, it will go back to us primarily. It will go back to us. It will be chaotic. Criminals left and right, immoralities left and right. So that's why that's the burden for those who are faithfully paying the taxes, but at the same time didn't get any programs or support from the government. Why? If you can still remember John Rawls' theory of justice as fairness. Hopefully you fully understand it, that it's for the greater cost, for the less advantage of people. We need to help each other. We need to think other people also. If you want to live peacefully, that's the only way. You need to help others for their problems, financially, emotionally, psychologically, physically. That is why that's the burden, of course, of sharing. You need to sacrifice. We need to sacrifice, especially those who have more than enough to share for others. Okay? So that would be for our discussion for taxation. Taxation in ethical perspective. Okay. So of course, if you have some questions, clarifications on lessons 5 discussions, you may raise it personally, you may chat me personally, but it's better for you to raise your question in our GC so that others can also reflect on your question, and maybe they can also share their opinions, insights from that question, so that everybody will benefit from that question. Okay? You're always welcome. Our GC is always open for that conversation. Okay? Now, for lesson 6, it's all about ethical challenges at present or today. Here, we will discuss parts of globalization, millennials or millennials, the way we describe our generation, and of course, pertaining to ethics and religion, in relation, of course, to ethics. Okay, so let's have first the moral challenges of globalization. Okay, as you already know, ethics concern is not only for ourselves, it's also concern are the others, or other people, as you're already aware. Globalization, according to World Health Organization, defined as the increase of interconnectedness and interdependence of people and countries. For Thomas Friedman, globalization as the inexorable integration of markets, transportation systems, communication systems to a degree never witnessed before in a way that is enabling corporations, countries, and individuals to reach around the world farther, faster, deeper, and cheaper than ever before. So, in short, through globalization, if you understand World Health Organization's and Friedman's statement, the idea of globalization is the idea of we are getting closer to each other compared before. We become connected globally than before. Our worldview, our perspective is not only limited to our country, to our localization, to our province, but our perspective, world perspective, are also consider other nations' concern, news about them. Their markets also affects our markets. Their political judgment also partly directly or indirectly affect our politics, let us say. So in short, in this world, big world, we become closely connected to each other. We become like a big family. That if there's one problem for of a country or two countries that has a war, it's a global problem. It's a global crisis. Why? Because it will be we will be affected in some ways, like what happened to the war of Russia and Ukraine, the rise of oil, let us say, Although it's their war, but since we are connected, that's the idea of globalization. We are connected to one another. Markets, politics, religion, even religion. The problem of the problem of these two countries becomes our problem also. Their crisis will become also our crisis, and that's what happened to our market, especially during the first day of the war between Ukraine and Russia. Okay. Now, ethically, and in ethical perspective, is the rise of globalization, it's morally right, or I don't know if you have already a subject on contemporary world, because contemporary world talks about globalization per se, specifically. Now, we have, of course, ethics. Let us evaluate globalization of what's happening in our world, whether it's morally good, justifiable, or bad. Okay. Now, let me browse because I don't want to be advanced, no, too advanced, because I'm afraid that I might miss some what they call it, some information. So, in short, we are in a we are in a generation where technology advance left and right, of course, those machines. Now, with regards to markets, with regards to finances, it might be a problem or issue in ethics our market, if our businessmen collect, hoard resources and not distribute it well to the workers. And that is becomes an issue in ethics. Now, globally speaking, globally, accordingly, the dominance of rich countries, especially capitalist countries, first world countries, economically, financially, politically, somehow, somehow dominate the less rich countries, especially the third world countries or developing countries. Why? If you look at the income and the distribution of resources, it's like a um, are you aware are you aware that many big companies put their factories in some countries that are low cost in terms of manpower? Are you aware of that? For example, I'm a big company, let us say Nike. It's a Western brand, American if I'm not wrong. They will make a factory to countries that are less fortunate and low in terms of manpower and cost. They put their factories in China, in India, in some other countries where the cost are lower, cheaper. But the gain, because it's a big company, but the gain, they gain a lot. They benefit a lot. In other sense also, another example also is that exploitation of other big countries, rich countries, to less rich countries, for example. That is also what happened in the Philippines. Are you aware that in the Philippines, especially, let us say, let me let me say one place in Palawan. according to the locals there, that for almost 100 years, the Americans benefit from their minerals, from their trees, logging. And after that 100 years, almost 100 years of benefiting, extracting our resources for their own good, for their own country, after that devastation of deforestation, what they left us are just scrap, minimal of our own good. And the idea of globalization, and the idea of correctedness, and the idea of progressing further to become a better country. Hopefully, ethically speaking, it would be good, let us say in utilitarian perspective, other than utilitarian perspective, if it maximizes the happiness, or let us say good result, for all, if not the majority. If they benefit from us, but at the end of the day, we should also benefit from it. That's the other way around, if you look at it, to make it right for utilitarian ethics. That what they are doing produces happiness, okay? But for the greatest number. It becomes immoral or bad if they become happy, but in terms of number, the majority are left behind. Only people, only few people benefit from it. Only few people becomes rich from it. Only few people dominate the market. For utilitarian ethics, that is immoral or morally bad. That is why, if you believe globalization, if you believe, if you analyze, if globalization is a stage where everyone becomes happy, that everyone benefits from it, then it's morally good. But if you believe that through globalization, many countries left behind, many countries were exhausted from the resources for the rich country, the gap between the rich and the poor, because of this what we call globalization, intensifies the power balance imbalance, intensifies politically, economically, than for utilitarian ethics, since it produces imbalance or pain for the majority of the population of the world, then it becomes morally bad. Morally bad. Let me read. No? Okay. Globalization has failed to maximize happiness for the greatest number of people, as I've told you. No? On one hand, advanced countries continue to reap its benefits while suffering relatively less from its consequence. Countries classified as third world countries suffers the dire results while progressing relatively slower. Yes, we are progressing, but the progress that we experience compared to the first world countries who extracted, who labored, our hard effort is too much, too great ang gap. That is why for utilitarian, it's not good. It's not good. Okay? For the ontological ethics, duty ethics or Kantian ethics, globalization will be condemned on the account that it exploited populations. If we will use, in market, if you're familiar with Karl Marx is one of the proponents that is against exploiting people, using people as a means, an instrument for the capitalist, for the owners. For deontological ethics, if you can still remember the principle of humanity, if rich countries go to, let us say, third world countries, just to use them as a means for their own good, if they will treat us as an instrument for their own good, like just we are just a piece that can be discarded anytime, then for deontological ethics, it is morally bad. It's morally bad. Especially if there is exploitation, violation of human rights, that being committed to this, what we call third world countries, for the benefit of the first world countries, to the rich countries, it is morally bad. It's morally bad. That's why exploitation of population, exploitation of resources, people are morally bad for deontological ethics. Why? Because it doesn't conform to the principle of humanity. It doesn't conform to the idea that each person, every person, should be respected, valued, not only as a means towards an end, but they themselves are the end. Okay? For virtue ethics, we all know that in virtue ethics, we discuss about golden mean. Golden mean is the idea of moderation. If you observe the golden mean, that we need our character, if we need our decision, our actions to maintain in the center between two opposite extremes, it means that our action should be in moderation. Dili ka siya sobra, dili po ka siya kulang. It should be in moderate. Now, talking about globalization, politically, economically speaking, if you believe that our world exerts too much for the population, creating, at the end of the day, creating wastes and pollution, then it's not moderation, then it's not morally good for virtue ethics. The idea of here about moderation, I will give an idea. For example, moderation, the idea of moderation is that if there are 100,000 people that you need to feed, you need only to extract our resources, let us say, use our resources, our raw materials, just to meet that number, 100,000. Do not get any resources, extra resources from our nature, let us say. Why? It's not moderation. Because if you will get more from our natural resources, let us say raw materials, and let us say only 100 users, 100,000 users are there, and let us say you get around, it will suffice for 100 million people, you are getting too much. You are wasting our resources. That is why, if you look at it, we produce more, but the consumption is just enough or less, let us say. You prepared 10 pack of goods or food, but there are only 5 persons who will eat from it. That's the idea. Now, what will happen to other 5 pack foods? If they are full, of course, if these 5 people are already full, this 5 pack of foods will be discarded. It will become a waste. It will become a waste. And that is not moderation. If you talk about moderation, you need only to prepare food that is sufficient for 5 people, since there are only 5 people that they will eat. Don't produce more, don't get more than what is needed. That's the idea of moderation for virtue ethics. Now, what happened to the idea of globalization? For rich countries, since it's a capital, it's a business for them, of course. They tend to get what is needed. Of course, it's money. They get more what we are needed. It's not the concept of moderation. That is not golden mean. Therefore, for virtue ethics, it is morally bad. Morally bad. Now, the challenge of pluralism. Somehow, we discussed already the idea of pluralism in uh, third lesson, if I'm not wrong, about culture and discuss some of the idea of pluralism. Although it's true that we become globalized, we become connected to one another, but it doesn't erase, it doesn't change the fact that we have different perspective, we have different ways of life, that we have different political inclination, religious belief. No, we cannot erase that. Okay. Now, the idea also of globalization is that mixing all these different beliefs into one. Let us say, for example, the idea here is that, for example, in the Philippines, if we are not globalized, dili na, the idea of Korean K-pop, the idea of Hollywood will not influence us. But because of the idea of pluralism and globalization, these other cultures' entertainment reach to us because more likely we are globalized, we are connected to one another, and our idea also becomes influence, mixed from it. Okay? So it is a state of society in which members of diverse ethnic, racial, religious, or social groups maintain an autonomous participation in and in development of their traditional culture, special interest within the confines of common civilization. In ethics, it is the supposition that are many independent sources of value, that there is no single truth. Why? Because if you look at it, why is it in ethics that it the result of pluralism leading to the idea that there is no single truth? Why? Because of the conflict of ideas. For example, in religion, that there is no absolute religion that is correct, that there is no one religion. Why? Because if we observe, the idea of pluralism will say us that we have different beliefs and every religion have their own point of view. They have also their strengths and weaknesses. Which of these religions are correct? Which of these religions are the truth or is the truth? Since it's hard to claim that one religion is the truth, how can you claim it? I'm also claiming my religion as the truth. It's like there is no truth. It's like relative. If you can say, remember the idea of relativism. It's relative. Since it's plurality, we have different perspective. That's the idea of pluralism. We have different or various perspective or belief. To summarize pluralism, it characterizes that in pluralism, it's not diversity alone, but energetic engagement with diversity. And that's what's happening in our society. We engage in this diverse culture. We learn from them and they learn from us. Okay? It's engagement, it's sharing of culture, of course. It is not just tolerance, we just not tolerate them, but active seeking of understanding across differences. With regards to our differences, we just not tolerate because "Utay mahimo, na siya," but we also try to understand their standpoint of view. In pluralism, it's not relativism, as you may say, accordingly, no? But it's the encounter of commitments or other commitments in a form of other cultures. In pluralism, though, accordingly, it's based on what we call dialogue, pakikipag-usap para magkaintindihan. Sounds like that. So that's why, due to pluralism, in calling for global ethics, we come up with what we call universal values. So in a pluralist world, in a diverse world, there are still what we call universal values that is true to all or practiced by the majority, as we learn it in our lesson 3. And these are the caring of the young, murder is wrong, ang telling the truth. No? So despite that what we call diversity, differences, we still have something in common. And these are the three that we share that is common to us. We care for the young. Murder is wrong. It cannot be right always. And we tell the truth. Okay. So these are the rise of globalization in relation to pluralism. And of course, side to side with the idea of ethics. Now, let's proceed to next topic, which is millennials and millennials, our generations, and what are the ethical challenges that we faced. Okay. So for those who are wondering, so what I mean by millennials or millennials, honestly, millennials, the other term for millennials are millennials. Now, who are the millennials? Millennials are those who were born in 1981, around 1981 to 2000. And those who were born, and there's also what we call Generation Z, by the way. For those who are born in 2001 and present, we call that we call that Generation Z. But more likely, yeah, but many of you maybe you are part of the Generation Z. You are not in millennials. No? Yes, but more likely it's still your concern. More likely. Mm. Uh, Three enduring truths about the youth: the notion of needing to find yourself. Find yourself. Maybe along of knowing yourself, understanding the self, hopefully you also find yourself. Mhm. That is also a concept that friends are everything. That is why maybe that's also one of the reasons why in Facebook, even though we don't know the one who friend request, we still accept it because more likely, according to the narratives, we have that kind of inclination to seek friends and finding your place or our place in the world. What is my purpose? So these are three enduring truths that we experience or you experience accordingly in your generation. Now, what are the ethical challenges that you faced in your generation? Of course, with regards to the idea of women empowerment, LGBTQ plus, mm, ethically speaking, these are your some of the ethical challenges that you face today. The idea of same-sex union, premarital sex, whether same-sex union is morally right or wrong, whether premarital sex is morally right or wrong, divorce, mental well-being, suicide, an armed conflict or war, like what happened to Ukraine and Russia. Okay? So hopefully, these challenges, by discussing some ethical principles in lesson 4, virtue ethics, content ethics, natural law ethics, utilitarianism, hopefully uh, gives you an insight, especially your personal standpoint in life in relation to this, what we call ethical challenges, whether it's right or wrong. Kindly revisit the ethical challenges. And of course, it's up to your more likely preference. But whether we have different preferences of what ethical principles that we used, but at the end of the day, what I'm praying for, what I'm hoping for, is that you become reasonable, that our arguments are reasonable, sound reason. It's not based on bias, personal bias of yours. You need to be objective. You need to be objective. Even the topic is something hurting to us. Okay? I want you to become objective at the end of the day. Okay? So that's my reminder for you, for your generation, especially in dealing with these ethical challenges. You need to be objective. For the common good, of course. You need to take note of the idea of caring for other people, working for the common good. Now, ethics and religion, we all know that somehow, if you can see, if you are aware, there are some close connections with ethics and religion. Yes, closely. Especially the idea of natural law ethics. Because majority, not majority, many Christian faith belief, Christianity, I tend to what we call natural law ethics. Yes. If you will ask Christianity, what they used in ethical perspective are based on natural law ethics. So if you revisit natural law ethics, you can also find some similarity with regards to your religious perspective on moral issues. Closely related siya. Of course, the role of religion in globalized world in nation of course ethics is religious tolerance. No? We all know that ethically speaking, we cannot force everyone to believe us or to follow us. Somehow, because of our differences, we need to tolerate. But hopefully, we're hoping for conciliation or reconciliation. If you can still remember universal values, at least man lang, dito magkasinabot. Dito magkasinabot. Eh, it is religious tolerance when we recognize the faith of another person as an act of his spirit free and unique. Ecumenical movement, the idea of ecumenical movement is that the concept of Christians gathering together, developing relationships, understanding, promote goodness, unity, of course, at the same time respecting one another. Okay, so that would be all for our discussion. Yes, for the final term. So God bless you all, guys. Hopefully, you can have a better grade. Of course, I'm only recording your grade as it is. Walang dagdag bawas. But what I'm praying for is that the courage and perseverance to study. Hopefully, you have the perseverance to study. In spite of the kakapoy, pressure. You need to do good, guys. You need to do good. You need to become better. You need to study. You need to have a good grades somehow. Although, as I've told you in our discussion, in our class, although it doesn't define you whether you are morally good or bad based on your grades, but for your future, considering your future later, one aspect of education that cannot be, it's hard to argue with is that somehow education is a way for us to alleviate our state of being, to achieve some of our dreams. One avenue for it is through education. So that is why if you have some big dreams out there, education might help you later. So that's why you need to be serious. Although it doesn't make you morally good, morally bad. No. As I've told you. But if you want to have a better life, chances are you need to have good education. You need to have a good grade. You need to study hard. You need to push hard. So that would be all, guys. And hopefully, you treat other people with sincerity, with respect. Kasi nasuko lang ka sila, sir. Yes, you need to still maintain that kind of idea that suko is suko, but respect is another perspective. You need also to become good. So, at the end of the day, hope you are well and have a good health. God bless you all and have a nice day, everyone. Goodbye.